It's thrilling for us to work alongside the American Photography Archives Group to help them build what is a community of people such as yourself that care so much about preserving and protecting great photographic works. ICP was founded by Cornel Capa, in fact, for those very reasons. He believed that pictures tell stories, and there needs to be an environment and a place where they can be preserved, protected, and presented. And at the foundation of ICP as a center, not only as a school and a museum, but also a very great collection. And what Mary does, what Penelope does, what all of you do in terms of your concerns about pictures and how they'll live a life outside of the immediate moment is central and important to all of us, so that those photographs will continue to tell stories. So I'm delighted that you're here. I'm thrilled that there's a full weekend of activity that talks about these issues, and I turn the podium over to our two organizers, Penelope and Mary Engel, and welcome them at ICP. Good luck. Thanks.
APAG started in 2003. Basically, people were sent to me. Several people were sent to me, and I would spend hours with them talking about, what I knew about archiving, which was just by having inherited my mother's archive in 1985. So I've handled it almost 30 years. The connection is deep with ICP, with photography. And the reason we're here is because we all have these incredible either archives or we're photographers, and we want to let the world see them. And that's what I do, and I've devoted my sort of life to do it. But I did used to work I've worked at other jobs. I worked at a talent agency, and my thought was I could represent all these crazy actors and writers, or I could just represent my parents. So I turned it into a full-time job. But I wish it was that easy, because it's not. I mean, we have images, and not only do we want the world to see them, we want people to buy them. We need to preserve them. We need to know what we have. We need to digitize them now. The whole world has changed with our archives and how we manage them and handle them. So it's really exciting that we're here.
In my years as an appraiser, in many years, we've come across many collections over the years that in archives and collections that need help, from basic organization to helping place them in institutions. And in some cases, many cases, we were very successful in working with them and finding them a home, and getting them organized, but in some cases we were not. The archive project, as we're calling it, gets underway. We're going to strive to offer free or very limited cost initial consultation services for artists and archives. We hope to set up access to interns. We're setting up a program of where we can get interns to work on archives. Set up relationships with archivists, some of whom we will be speaking, you'll meet today. Find institutions willing to take the work and help negotiate the placements of the work, because that's the key part here, and work with appraisers to value the work. So that's the core part of the archive project, which is basically be an arm, an adjunct to APAG.
We've all had this experience where we know it's there and we can't find it, right? So the thing that is important to remember is that bodies in front of boxes are important, but they have their limitations. Memory is not 100%, as we all like to think that our memory is impeccable. It's not. Labels on boxes are usually singular and flat. Sometimes labels do very poorly with cross-referencing things. You have a label, and you have to know what's behind that label or what it's involved. So there's a place for digitization or digitized organization of an archive that's very important, that I love and that I love doing. And it allows you to do things like have very speedy metadata tagging. It allows you to do cross-referencing in a myriad of ways that aren't possible with just a human being in a box. It allows things like, instead of having your file name be consistent, it actually will make the file name be consistent for you, because there's magic that database can do. It can spit out your photograph or the TIFF, it can rename it, and then you can send it to somebody if it's in a database that knows how to do that.
And in the project that I'm doing, I'm interested in how archives around the country abound with thousands and thousands, if not millions, of late 19th century photographic portraits. And these portraits are labeled as anonymous, without a name. We don't know the occupation of the people, the specific history or social context. They were produced, if we're thinking about the 19th century, of course, as daguerreotypes, cartes de visite, cabinet cards, tintypes from the 1840s, well into the 20th century. And these are handheld images that were often placed in family albums, becoming part of a larger private and public narrative that spanned the generation. So when we think about some of the issues facing archives and archiving, what do we do when we have these images that we really don't? We can kind of group them maybe by subject matter or by time period, but in order to be able to kind of go a little bit deeper than that, I think that's what I'm really interested in doing.
I believe fundamentally in the totality of an archive. I worked heavily with Penelope Dixon and many other people. I went to every institution in the United States to look at what they do with their archives and how they process the archives in understanding where to place Magnum's archive. And now that I'm here at ICP, I want to be in the archive business.
I think that the liability to police the internet rests on the content owner, whether it's the record company, the music publisher, the photographer, the film company, and I don't think shifting that responsibility necessarily to the provider is a good idea unless the provider is now categorizing and paying attention to those infringing works.
Although as technology gets better,
It could
it
be
will
easier.
be easier
Right.
for them to do. I mean, right now, if you put your own face into Google Images, you're going to get 400 unrelated images that have nothing to do with you.
Yeah, it's
So
bad.
the crawler technology is not great. It's better than it was. If you put in a very well-known image and you select the entire image, it's pretty good at returning the same thing. But if we go back to just talking about metadata, if someone's using the exact same file and that file was infringing and someone filed a notice, then that could be something that potentially the ISP or the online service provider, could stop. But even doing that, someone could very simply take your photo, file, save as, change the metadata, and then we're back to square one again. So until the technology gets better, it's going to be fairly impractical for any online service provider to police that.
The last thing I wanted to do was just talk about being flexible in this day and age, not being too precious about things. This is the Karsh estate's hope, is that the images stay relevant and alive, and I get to make those decisions. So we photographed Nelson Mandela in 1990. It was one of the last major sessions that Karsh did. And when he died, I did, there's not that many magazines left. I'm competing with Getty. I'm still trying to get high fees. So we didn't have a massive amount of usage, but I woke up the following morning to an email from Apple, and they wanted to use it. And then they wanted to change it. And then they wanted to not give me a credit. And I decided to say yes for not much money. And the Karsh estate told me they thought it was the greatest thing that I had done for Karsh in 10 years. It was on the homepage of apple.com for 3 weeks. It's become the iconic image of Nelson Mandela.
So very quickly, having looked at everything, one day I said to John, we have a book, we have an exhibition. And he really thought I was pulling his leg. He started laughing and said, don't be ridiculous. My pictures are not that good. And I said, well, leave it up to me to decide. And I'll become your agent, I'll become your editor, I'll become your curator, and I'll make you a star as a photographer. You will become the oldest emerging photographer in the world. Which he actually has become.
So let's talk about expectation of value. When we're talking about what is ultimately going to be the price points that we're going to look at when we're looking at that data, Well, we're looking for the most common values. And the reality is that any artist, I mean, any artist from Edward Weston, Ansel Adams, when we look at what the market for their prints are relative to their careers, the reality is that it's a couple hundred images at best, maybe it's 50, maybe it's 20, that are going to be the ones that are regularly traded. Those are the data points that we've got. Every artist is going to have their quote-unquote moonrise image. So we look at that as the basis, when we see what has been traded on a regular basis, what those data points are, that helps us be able to establish and set a level from which we will now work down from.
Do museums want archives? No, they don't, but they should.